Welcome to the Fathers Forum on Fathering in a Pandemic, presented by Liberation Programs, Mountainside, and Wilton Youth Council. This conversation was recorded on June 20th and has been edited for length and to protect the privacy of the dads who participated. Our moderators posed questions to John Hamilton, the president and CEO of Liberation Programs and father of three, and Brian McManus, a recovery coach at Mountainside and also father to three. We'll now pick up the conversation.
Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like being home now with, your kids may be home or that they're home and having these challenges, but what's been different as a dad, as a parent since the pandemic started?
Fiona, yeah, I would just start by saying that, I don't think anybody, unfortunately, on this call we don't have our 10,000 hours in yet, right? In any level of expertise on how to live through a pandemic, although we're getting close to that amount of time. So what really struck me in all this is the sense of humility, of really, being humbled by not really having the answers that I feel like I could always confidently have with my kids. And it is a concern because a lot of what they're experiencing, particularly my 14-year-old who, had an 8th grade graduation that she missed, and it's all about loss. And there isn't that sense of context of a life experience to know that, and this too will pass. And of course, we really have to be very careful in giving any sense of false hope. We have to be able to know what we know and know what we don't know. And they're so infused with social media of so many facts about what's going on that the greatest gift that we can give them is to give them hope and to give them the message that we're in this together, as everybody said, different boats, same storm. But we need to recognize that the first level of community is the family, and that's how their world will start to feel safe and stable again. So to be able to create new routines, new structures, new rituals, and continue to just check in with your kids is so important at any age. I check in with, my 38-year-old, my 14, and my 13-year-old in a different way, and they have different needs, but they need to just know that there's a lifeline there, and we have to be able to just show them, that we're there. And as I always say, you have to show them how much you care before you show them how much you know. And in some ways, one of the advantages through this pandemic is the sense of humility, is that we don't have the answers. So what we really need to be there is to actually be present in their grief, in their loss, in their fear, and hold that without trying to take it away. Because oftentimes as a dad, you want to take away your kid's pain. And by doing that, sometimes you're really not honoring, their experience. And to have an authentic relationship with them, you need to be able to stay with that pain, share some of your own pain, but be in a place to offer them some glimmer of hope in a vulnerable way.
I am going to piggyback on a lot of what John just said. I think the most important thing I've found is being honest with my kids at this point, letting them know that there's a lot I don't know, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but also doing that in an age-appropriate manner. My conversations with my 20-year-old are different than my conversations with my 14-year-old. They're equally as honest, but they're at different levels. They're in different places in their life. So I want to let them know that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be concerned about their future, but that they know that my wife and I are here for them. We're here to support. We're here to help them, and that all situations are very difficult to manage by yourself. But together, we'll be able to get through this. And we will get to another side. When? I don't know. How it's going to work, I'm not sure about that either. But, if we do it together and we use each other for support, we use each other to lean on, and that we're honest about our feelings, our emotions, our uncertainties, that it's going to make it easier. And you know that everyone is uncertain. And John, I really like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour reference. And it's true. None of us are experts on this. And we can't portray to our kids that we are. Because, you know, they will realize at some point we're not. And, you know, to be honest, to let them know we care, let them know that we support them, is the most important thing we can do right now. Be there for them. Let them acknowledge their experience, acknowledge what they're going through, and do our best to support them through it.
Brian, if I could just add that idea of not having the 10,000 hours in and having humility and having that sense of powerlessness, I just want to reframe that for the dads on the call. This is a strength. This is a strength that we're not aware of. The ability to show them that we don't have all the answers is what's going to build a relationship with us in a new way. And it's a real opportunity to put ourselves out there and talk about some of our own struggles in life in the past and life today. It gives them hope. I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with that have the sense of pressure because they feel like their dads have it all together and they didn't go through some of the struggles and stumble through life like they are. And so, and I always say, like at a family meal, don't ask your kid, you know, hey, how was that Zoom algebra test today? Say, hey, let me tell you what an ass I made of myself at work today. You know, I was doing this presentation, fell back on my chair. Everybody laughed on the Zoom call. It was so embarrassing. And you're more likely to have your kids say, oh, Dad, you should have seen what happened to me on a Zoom call the other day. You think that was embarrassing. And now you're having an authentic conversation. Now you're leading with that sense of, you know, I understand what it is to be human. So use this time. Quality time with parenting is inherently embedded in quantity time. Use this time with your kids to strike while the iron is cold and have those good conversations by leading with your own experience, your own struggles, and it'll offer your kids hope in a way that most parents don't realize. It's almost like a paradoxical intervention. It's like, as I say, the more you show your humanness, the more you're lovable. So by my experience working with dads, when I've had dads say, you know, tell your kid that no matter what you say or do, you know, it won't change the way you love them. And dads are like, of course they know that. We'll tell them anyway. I can't tell you how often when a dad tells a kid that, they're blown away because they did not know that and they did not realize that their parents' love is unconditional. Their dad's love will not change, and that opens up a new sense of bond and relationship and maybe even a lifeline of being able to share things that they weren't able to share before. Because again, you have to be in a place where a lot of dads ask me, you know, should I talk about what I did in high school and college, especially like high-risk behaviors, drinking, doing drugs? And my answer is always the same because I have a bias. I was like, well, how honest a relationship do you want to have with your kids? And that, you know, if they ask the question, follow their lead, right? You're not just, you know, don't tell your 7-year-old about war stories when you were like hanging out at parties and everything and then kind of emotionally bleeding and you're like, oh, I'm glad I got that off my chest. No, you're going to follow up with their lead of what they want, of them wanting to know information. And it's again, not like you're romanticizing it, but you're just answering their questions and having an honest relationship. Because we actually did a poll in Greenwich and found out that even though a lot of kids didn't feel like they could be honest with their dads, they felt like their dads weren't honest with them. Because if you're not going to tell them the truth, they're going to hear it from your cousin at the next wedding and funeral anyway. That's going to throw you under the bus. Oh, you should have seen your dad in high school. He was a maniac. So, you know, lead by example, and you be the one that shares that. And it's not going to, condone that behavior. It's not going to put your kids more at risk. It'll actually reduce the risk because of that bond and authentic relationship. So, I mean, one of the keys, and of course, you know, we're in the business of in my agency, Liberation, of substance use prevention and treatment. So we know that increased exposure at an early age increases risk, but also increased exposure to toxic stress. So if kids are not comfortable in their own their own skin and they're holding on to that stress, they're going to be in a position where they'll be more likely to use substances to self-medicate. Because people will use alcohol, vaping, and substances for two reasons: to feel good and to feel better. And let's face it, with all that's going on in our kids' world today, it's very hard for kids to do anything to feel good. Most of them are now moving in the category of self-medicating, which is the same thing that we're finding with adults who are now all of a sudden day drinking and maybe misusing alcohol for the first time because they're actually self-medicating their sense of despair and anxiety. So again, one of the greatest gifts you have to give to your kids is lead by example in the role model of your relationship with alcohol, and not use it to self-medicate, but have it in a context of social use only. Threw a lot out there. I think we're running out of time.
I'm gonna piggyback on John once again. You know, I'm a person in long-term recovery. Just to throw that out there. And one of the things that I struggled with for a long time was asking for help, because I was brought up, as many dads are, in a culture where you're supposed to handle your own stuff and take care of your own problems. One of the greatest gifts I received in my recovery was the ability to ask for help. And that's something that I want to pass along to my kids. Sometimes asking for help is not a sign of weakness like many of us think it is. Sometimes it's the strongest thing a person can do. And to let my kids know that they don't have to have all the answers. Smart people realize they don't. Smart people know that they need to ask other people for help. And that's what I want my kids to be able to do.
It's so interesting what you just mentioned, Brian and John. So I'm just wondering, if you see your kids struggling, whether it's they're 10 years old, 12, 17, 18, 24, etc. What's the best way to help that loved one? I mean, it's so hard when they themselves don't know that they either need help or need support, because to your point, they're afraid to ask for help.
Exactly. And that's a great question today. And going back to Brian's ability to ask for help, a good way to look at that is even to start with reframing the way you approach your kids. Ask them for help, right? You always have to look through the lens, like I have this lens of my glasses, a humble lens of not knowing your kid's world. Does anybody on this phone know what the hell TikTok is? Or Instagram or Snapchat and all? It's their world. So come from that humble lens and ask for help. Like say, hey, Mia, I need your help. I need to understand how I'm doing as your dad. What am I doing that's helpful? What am I doing that's driving you crazy? What can I do differently? Now at least you're working kind of collaboratively as a negotiation of what you're willing to do, because they may say, leave me alone for the next 10 years. I'm like, that doesn't really feel like love and support. Let's talk a little more about that, right? But ask for their help, because they're the experts in a way in their own feelings and what they need. And share in the vocabulary feelings by sharing your own sense of worry, concern. I get worried, I get concerned. I went to this workshop and I heard about all this stress people going through, and I was like, wow, could that be going on with my kids? And then to check in from that humble one down stance. Now you will open that dialogue in a way where your kids may feel like it gives them permission and it feels safe to be able to share. And again, go from that standpoint of do your scorecard with your kid. If you can open that humility up, again, that lens, whether the kid's 38 or 13. Hey, how am I doing? And you might have really hit it out of the ballpark with your 12-year-old version of that kid, but now at 15, you're struggling, right? And oftentimes not to get too deep in everything because we don't have that kind of time, but it's probably where you got stuck in your life, and you might be transferring some of that stuff onto your kids, right? You always have a bias. You had the best dad in the world, you try to be the same way as them and replicate that. If you had a dad that you really had a troubled relationship with, you try to do everything differently. And in both cases, you're wrong. You're not paying attention to what you really need to pay attention to. It's not what worked with your kid or what worked with your spouse's or partner's kid, but what works with your own kids, right? Or what worked not in your life. So recognize your bias, keep that out of the room, and try to pay attention to what works. And whenever possible, if you do have a partner, work as a united front. You know, the greatest gift a father can give to his children, another great gift is to love their mother. And the greatest gift the mother can give to their children is love their father. Because that's where kids learn intimacy. Intimacy is between partners and peers. One thing to learn paternal love, but to give your kids a fighting chance to have them believe that they can give and receive love in their life and intimacy, they need to be able to believe their own flesh and blood can be there for each other. And if you're a single parent or if it's a divorce situation, treat the other parent with dignity and respect. That's where kids will learn dignity and respect. And that's an important message. Keep their world safe.
So, John, can you talk to us a little bit about some of us who have younger kids, kids who are still in middle school or high school
Yes.
or late elementary school at home, and we maybe are having the opposite problem of having a little too much time with our kids right now.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if some of our parents are struggling with sort of how to keep the connection when we're sort of stuck in a daily Groundhog Day situation of
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
everything
yeah.
we're dealing with right now.
It's a great question because it's like when you're home, you know, and we're working from home, your kids have this experience. Oh, you're home. And it changes the whole context and dynamic of, especially with dads oftentimes, where they're home when you're home, you're checking in as a dad. You may still, you could be in the work mode. You are in the work mode. So you have to create some boundaries of have some isolated area that isn't going to filter into downtime, but still be able to find a schedule that works for your kids and works for you to be able to do things maybe you normally wouldn't do, like have lunch with them or have breakfast with them, and then go to like your office. If you have an area in your home where you can actually see it, let them know you're going to your office, but you'll be available in emergency, just as if you were in Greenwich or in Wilton and somewhere, you know, out of town. But really be able to keep them grounded in what rituals are and a schedule is that's reasonable and works for them, so it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day. So have the week. Well, now, you know, with school being over, you know, it was easier during the school week when there was actually work to be done. But make sure that the weekends are distinguished from the week and that there's activities, and look at it as activities for kids to be part of the, again, remember I say the family is the first level of community. For kids to be mentally healthy, they need to feel lovable, capable, and connected. So
John,
have them participate in the family chores and love and have them feel part of the family by giving them responsibilities that are age appropriate, and have them really feel like that they're, you know, they're a valued member in the family. Yes. Maybe said something.
oh yeah, hey John, this is Robert. John, in your thinking, does homeschooling change any of those dynamics? What I hear from various people is that it's the most complicated thing that they've ever tried to do, and I just don't have a lot of perspective because I kicked my kids out of the house a couple of years ago. But I'm curious because that's what I hear. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think it's great to actually check in with your kids to see if you can help them with homework when they're younger, because again, it brings that humility to the forefront of a new dynamic in their relationship, where kids may all of a sudden realize they know more about algebra than you do, you know, and then at the same time, you're willing to sit with them and struggle through this, just as almost like a metaphor for struggling through this pandemic together. We'll get through this together. So check in with them to say, what can you do that's helpful, and know that the dynamics are different now because you are there, you know, instead of a loco parentis, you're a loco teacher, right? You're the teacher in absence that has to be able to stay on top of them, but in a way that recognizes, and just like in a healthy parent, you're not trying to control, you're trying to influence. Unhealthy parenting is power struggles and control, tyranny, right? Healthy parenting is influencing them by your example and having them be empowered to be able to feel like, you know, they're not alone. Check in with your kids too and ask them, you know, what messages do you give them to let them know that you really believe in them? Because oftentimes by trying to help as a dad, we come across being critical, and the walk away message for the kid, particularly with school sometimes, is, oh, I'm never going to get this, I'm a loser. And they're so hypercritical sometimes to themselves, and they don't need their dad to come down on them. So you have to be careful. Remember, all unsolicited feedback, if your you know, kid's not asking for feedback, and come across as criticism. And that's where dads get confused sometimes. We come across feeling like we're supposed to be the expert, and again, we need to listen more to what our kids need, instead of have a sense of like trying to be helpful with what's going to be nothing short of having them shut down because they're hearing a lecture, they're hearing something that's just going to shame them or embarrass them, instead of having them feel like we're honoring them, we're supporting them, praising them, and have faith in them. Having faith in your kids is different than trusting them. Like in adolescent development, a kid's job is to individuate, separate, and be autonomous. You know what that means? To piss you off, to make their own decisions and set their own boundaries. So don't take it personally. Don't make it about you, and be nice and forgive. So, right? So instead, have faith in them that just like everyone else on this call, we're all making the best decisions available for the resources and choices that we have. So if your kid's struggling with something, assess it on 2 levels. Do they have ability or willingness? Do they have the skill set to do that work at home? If not, try to give them what they need to give them that skill set to learn. Or if it's a willingness issue and motivation issue, try to motivate them in a way to give them an incentive. It's not a bribe, it's an earned reward. Find something of value that's appetizing to them. So maybe, again, algebra isn't something they like, but the next big thing that they want in some gaming is something they can earn. So find something that's a win-win. It's a lot more pleasant to celebrate success and catching them doing something right and earning towards those incentives and setting up this power struggles and punitive kind of parenting. It's just not as effective. It's miserable, right? So why be miserable? Why not celebrate success and find things that kids can earn that they can be incentivized by?
And I just want to, again, just go back to something John said earlier. The kids are experts on how they feel. They're experts on themselves. We're there to support them. We don't have to be the ones who tell them, this is what you do. This is how you do it. We're treating them like objects that way. We have to partner with them, support them, but do it in a way where you're still parenting. Listen, that is still my biggest challenge, because I want to say, I've been there. I know that this is how you handle it. No, they're not me. So listen to how they feel. Listen to what they're doing, and be open to hearing them.
And you hear a lot that not to be your kid's friend, but be careful though. It doesn't mean not to be friendly and kind to your kids. Big difference.
I have a question. It's Joyce. John and Brian, could you comment? John, you speak so beautifully about the effect of the marriage on kids and what fathers, whether it's marriage or partnership, whatever relationship folks are involved in. Could you comment on the power of that relationship and how it affects kids, and especially during COVID when it's been tough, not having a lot of private time?
Yes, that's a great question, Joyce. And I think, again, our responsibility as dads is to role model hope and health and happiness and fun. So it's so important now with our kids to have this time with them. Isn't just to have time with them, but to see them, have us enjoy each other, enjoy your mate more than your kids, and have your kids see that you have your partner's back, you have your spouse's back, and they have your back. That's what keeps your kids' world safe. Otherwise, if you're in tension and you're at each other's, kind of throats, they can divide and conquer, and their world isn't safe. So it's not so important to feel like you're being right as to come to an agreement and a consensus that you both can live with. And oftentimes, dads and mom, what they do is they polarize issues. Where on a continuum now, all of a sudden, they're responding to the other parent instead of responding to what the child needs. It's called a complementarity. In other words, I've had dads say, I got to be really tough on the kids because my wife, she's just so soft, she's so easy. Then I talk to the person's wife, and they're like, well, I gotta give the kid a break because he's just so hard on them. So now you're polarizing your stance to each other instead of trying to come to a consensus in the middle of what you can live with and be able. That's what's going to create sanity for your kids, a safe world and a safe environment for your kids to know where they stand with both parents and to come to agreement in a way that's reasonable. Reasonable parenting is based on who your kids are, not who you think they should be.
Excellent. Thank you.
Tay has a question?
Yeah, I don't mean to jump in. So But just in an, you know, when the kids are young, could you just talk a little bit about how to really encourage your kids to make healthy decisions for themselves? You know, you don't want to sort of tell them what to do, but you know if they're heading in the wrong direction. Just the concept of healthy decision making
Yeah.
and sort of the process of that as
Well,
they.
again, it depends on the age, right? And so that becomes a
I'm
key
talking
piece.
about young, you know, like even young, like, you know, 7, 8, 9 years old, when they start to really sort of, you know, experimenting, figuring things out.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, you want kids to have a life experience. So again, it's about being able to not micromanage your kid to have them end up becoming so anxious because they're going to second guess everything they do. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that is some of the issues that dad sometimes inadvertently stumble through, which is trying to overcorrect their kid using the wisdom of your life experience versus let your kid have their own experience and check in to see how all your kids' choices are working for them. Right. So I even talk about this as kids get older in like middle school, like 7th, 8th grade. Check in with your kids when they're in that age because oftentimes there's loss. There's loss, with choices. Every choice you make, right? You make one choice, it's choosing not to make another. So, for instance, I've had kids in 7th, 8th grade come into my office and break down and cry because their best friend from preschool is not calling them anymore because they don't decided not to vape or drink or do drugs. Now they're not getting any calls on the weekend. So just because we as dads are like, oh, my kids don't do drugs, isn't that great? Well, check in to see how that choice is working for them, and you may have to sit with their grief and sadness that they're experiencing loss, And so all choices have consequences. So connect with your kids again. Use a vocabulary of feelings, of sharing your own feelings, and being able to check with your kids on a feeling level of how all their choices have consequences. How's it working with them? How's it not working with them?
So Thea, we actually tried to anticipate a little bit, when it came to drugs and alcohol. We tried to give them kind of a heads up. And Joyce actually did some role playing with them to say, what would you do, and name one of their friends. If Devin came to you and said, hey, let's drink, or hey, let's try this. And I thought that was really a genius move on Joyce's part because it gave them the awareness that something like this might happen and how would you deal with it, and that it was, a potential challenge for them in the future. And I thought
a
that
real
was,
frame of reference too, with a real friend.
Yeah. It was great because I think oftentimes, our kids get blindsided and, there's someone that they trust comes up to them and says, hey, try this. And they feel compelled that they have to do it. So, that's one thing I always refer to in some of these sessions that, worked well for us and kept our kids clean, through their important years.
I think that's an important point too, for Thea, your question about with younger kids, but I think that's probably, the same with older kids, too, and even young adults going into college and things like that, that those pressures still exist, with meeting new friends and trying to fit in. So I think probably, I don't know your thoughts, John, but probably that resonates for many years of your child's life.
Can I hop in and just add something for a second? One of the things that, pitfalls that my wife and I have seen in our own lives, we try to manage everything for our kids. Friend groups. One of the things we have to do is let the kids have experience. Let them fail. Let them go through some things. Everything doesn't have to be perfect, and let them experience that, and help by communicating with them that those things are okay, and how they can learn from those experiences. I think especially where we live, we want our kids to fit into certain boxes. Well, not all our kids are going to fit into those boxes, and let them know that that's okay. Let them have the experiences to figure out who they are, and support them. Hopefully that makes some sense at all.
A couple of years ago, to Brian's point, we did focus groups in a community because parents were worried about kids' peer pressure and the stress that they felt. And at the end of these focus groups in the primary school and middle school, the greatest sense of pressure the kids felt, to Brian's point, was their parents. That they were going to disappoint their parents, or that they had to go to certain schools because their parents went to those schools. Even if they told them not to, they looked at the success of their parents. And one of the quotes from the kids I always remember was, in this community, being normal means being a loser. I've got to be the best. I've got to excel, or my parents are going to be disappointed. So again, as dads, check in with your kids. Let them know how proud and how much you love them, because they are, not because of what they achieve. There was a book years ago called Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. It was called How Narcissistic Parents Form and Deform the Lives of Their Talented Children. It didn't sell too many copies with a shame-based title like that. But the spirit of the book was very clear, is that if you have your kids only feel like, their relationship with you is based on their successes, that starts on putting that art up on the refrigerator from preschool, and the kids, unfortunately, as they get older, will be disconnected to their true sense of self, because their sense of worth is going to be about pleasing their parents versus really being able to do things that are true to themselves. And those kids later on will end up struggling with intimacy issues and depression.
John, I think that actually kind of gives us a great way to segue into sort of how you could sum this up for all these dads who are heading into this summer, where our kids are not going to be doing the same kinds of activities they would normally do. And in communities like Wilton, our kids are usually booked up with all sorts of enrichment opportunities for the summer, and this summer is going to look a lot different than that. So can you kind of help us understand, as we wrap this up, how we can think about the benefits our kids are going to get from this unusual summer, and some positives that maybe as parents we can focus on during this time where our kids are not going to be as scheduled on those sort of achievement focused activities, but maybe they're getting some other positive experience out of this?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. And again, my message for this group of dads today is see this as opportunity to have an amazing relationship with your kids. See this as a blessing. It really has changed my priorities in life, right? Where now work is just a job. It always was just a job, but what's most important now is your health and your family. So, lead by example. Again, by, as I say, there's the family is the first level of the community. But, to the question, right now in the summer, it may be the only community involvement your kid has, or most of the community involvement. So take advantage of the fact that you have this ability to have that quantity of time that will improve your quality of time for years to come. And kids will look back and this, as my kids are already talking about, it's like, wow, I really feel like that I'm going to be part of history. This is history. For them, it's something we can go back on and like, where were you during the pandemic of 2020? Well, we were together and here's what we did, and pull some memories that are positive memories that kids will have, regardless of what their age is, for a lifetime, that will help them build resiliency, because they could see during times of stress, my dad and mom showed up. They were human. They showed their vulnerability. They showed their love. They showed their consistency and support during tough times. And that will get them not just through this summer, but get them through years to come.
I'm going to just add on, have fun, enjoy. Mm-hmm. This is a unique opportunity. We have time to spend. We're not running to the soccer game. We're not running to a dance class. We're not chasing something. Sit back. Enjoy your kids. Enjoy the people they've become. Have conversations. Do the stuff that, we used to do as kids. Go for a hike with your kids. Play wiffle ball in the backyard. Just, it doesn't have to always be a race to something. Take the time, slow down, and enjoy.
But again, I would just say, absolutely right, Brian, but try to enter their world as well. Try to learn about their social, not just play wiffle ball, because we like wiffle ball and I can hit a curve,
Absolutely.
but also, learn about, the Roblox game or whatever, and all the Minecraft and all. If it's interesting to your kid, that's what matters. And don't dismiss it, and try to see this as an opportunity to learn what makes them tick and what's passionate in their world as well.
Absolutely. Take time to find out about them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Enjoy them as people.
Thank you for listening to the Fathers Forum, presented by Liberation Programs, Mountainside, and Wilton Youth Council. Please visit our websites for information about each organization's programs. To download the tip sheet for dads, visit the Parent Education Programs page on www.wiltonyouth.org. Thank you.